What's up, all my movie-loving maniacs? This your boy Bigfoot B of the Lassiter Factor, and I am back with Spider-Man or Spider-Man-related movie content. Last month, I rewatched Infinity War. This month, I rewatched Avengers Endgame, which is next, so had to bring out the glove again. Let's review. Avengers Endgame is the fourth Avengers film, and it was the culmination of the Infinity Saga, in which it takes place after Infinity War. What's left of the Avengers, they try to undo what Thanos did, but Thanos destroys the stones. Thor chops his head off, 5 years pass, and then Ant-Man, he is free from the quantum realm, in which he figures out a way to time travel, and so they all come together to get the stones and bring them back to the present so that they can undo the snap. Now, of course, you don't need me to tell you how impactful this movie was. Like I said, it was the culmination of the Infinity Saga. It was the final film of the Infinity Saga, in which everything up until that point led to this, and spoiler alert, they do undo the snap. And of course, it was the biggest hit of 2019. In fact, probably the last year that the world felt normal pre-COVID. And as beloved as this movie is, of course, this movie at times has elements that either don't quite hold up or do hold up, but of course not every movie is going to hold up quite well, and this movie in particular, it does have its give or take, and even when it came out, it had its give or take. With that being said, upon rewatch, well, I find myself rewatching this every time I marathon a specific character that has a new movie coming out. In fact, I think the last time I rewatched this, I believe, was 2023, when I marathoned this in rotation for Guardians of the Galaxy 3. But of course, this time kind of felt different, given that we do have a new Avengers movie hopefully coming out by the end of this year. But otherwise, yeah, I still think this movie holds up as a finale. And I just like the structure of this movie. It's basically 3 acts, though I do think the second act is bigger than the first and third act. But the first act is basically the aftermath of Infinity War. They try to undo what Thanos did, but it was too late. And then 5 years passed by, and I always liked how they let the world just sit with, Thanos snapping half the population away. And who would have thought Ant-Man was the one to figure out how to undo everything just by time travel, though through the luck of some random ass rat. And what's left of the Avengers, we get to see what they're doing post snap and how they're dealing with it, but then they all eventually come together to undo everything. Now, I say not everything about this movie holds up, and I think we can all agree that Professor Hulk being introduced in this movie was pretty much the downfall of where the Hulk has been post Endgame, because they haven't really done really good with this character ever since, and they just painted themselves into a corner right here, and I just felt like we never really got enough of Savage Hulk. Now, granted, most of it was because of rights issue, because Universal did have the rights to the Hulk, but still. But Thor, who does become Fat Thor, I did love his arc in this movie because he was definitely depressed. And of course, it was played for laughs when we saw that he became Fat Thor. But at its core, we can see that even gods, they can get depressed and they can fall. And if Thor, the god of thunder, can get fat, that is real depression. Now, the second act is basically the time travel sequence in which they all split up into different teams and go back to different points in time to retrieve the stones. And yes, I do agree that this is probably the weakest part of the film because it's pretty much fan service. It's pretty much Marvel's greatest hits. But boy, was it still fun to revisit certain events and see different characters at different points in time, and even some returning characters. Like, we get to see them go back to New York 2012, where the first Avengers took place, that first battle. Hulk, he goes to the Ancient One to retrieve the Time Stone, and then Steve, Tony, and Scott Lang, I'm blanking on names here, they pretty much go to the Avengers Tower so that they can get the space and the scepter, which has the Mind Stone. Though they were unsuccessful in that and actually end up having Loki start a Disney Plus series. But Captain America and Tony Stark, they do go back in time. They go back even further in time to not only retrieve more Pym particles, but to also get some much needed closure and some reassurance. Like Steve Rogers, he sees Peggy for the first time, well, that age in years, and he's rethinking about the life that Tony was inspiring him to go get. And then Tony Stark, he gets some much needed closure with his estranged daddy. Thor and Rocket, they travel back to Asgard in 2013 during the events of Thor: The Dark World, in which Thor, he has a conversation with his mother before she inevitably dies, and it was enough to get him out of his depression. well, I won't say completely out of his depression, but it was pretty much the next step to push him forward. Rhodey and Nebula managed to get the Power Stone, but 2014 Thanos snatches Nebula after her little memory thing starts short circuiting with the 2014 version of Nebula. And side note, yeah, the 2014 version of Thanos is definitely a lot different than the Infinity War version of Thanos, which I always kind of found interesting. Like this one just seems more angry and ruthless, whereas the Infinity War version of Thanos, yeah, he was ruthless, but at that point he was just so confident. It's like I don't even need to try anymore, and yet he still won. Black Widow and Hawkeye they go to retrieve the Soul Stone, and rest in peace, Black Widow. She's the one to make the sacrifice. Then, of course, I gotta talk about Act 3, which is the best part of the movie. Captain Steve Rogers gets the shield because he is worthy, which I remember got the biggest cheer in the theater. I'll tell you, Avengers Infinity War is one of my favorite theater experience. And yes, I do have to mention, they do manage to reverse the snap, and all the dusted heroes return, along with their with armies like Asgardians, Ravagers, you name it. They all come in for this fight against Thanos, and again, one of the top moments that got the theaters cheering. Everybody had something to do, and we even got that hug between Spider-Man and Tony Stark. Pepper Potts joins in the fight, but of course there is the one bit during the battle that made all the right-wing snowflake grifters upset. Now, is it unlikely that all the female characters would end up in that exact same spot? Yes. But who the fuck cares? This is the perfect movie to do it in. Come on now. Like, I feel like everything up until this point, they did such a good job that they've earned moments like this. And then, of course, Tony Stark is the one to make the sacrifice play where he snaps Thanos and his army out of existence. And the man that started the MCU dies, saving the world. Or the universe, I should say. Which leads to a bittersweet funeral for Tony Stark, where we see everybody that has ever been in a Marvel movie. And then, of course, everything up until this point is just everybody getting into their Phase 4 starting positions. Like, of course, the one decision that made all the right-wing snowflake grifters angry, and that is Steve Rogers passing the shield on to Sam Wilson as the new Captain America. Steve Rogers went on to go live his life with Peggy and inspired this famous meme. Steve Rogers, he finally learned to go live his life, and that was the end of the movie. Like I said, I do think this movie does succeed in a lot of really good ways, but I can't deny that sometimes it does trip on itself in a number of ways, but I feel like the times that it didn't trip on itself outweighs the times that it did, and I do think that this movie still holds up as a perfect finale. In fact, a lot of people, myself included, this is where they should have stopped, but they just kept going. I still prefer Infinity War over Endgame, but like I said, I like seeing the heroes fail in that movie because it made their eventual victory in this movie that much worth it. Avengers Endgame, of course, gets the heart eyes emoji. Thank y'all so much for watching. Have you seen, odds are you have seen Avengers Infinity War, so I'm just going to ask, what's your favorite moment from this movie? Let me know in the comment section below. This is your boy Bankful B of the Lassiter Factor. Stay safe, wash your hands.